Possibly the most infamous incident of all time, still unsolved to this day. This topic has been talked about on numerous media outlets and YouTube channels. The Dyatlov Pass incident, where 9 experienced ski hikers died under mysterious circumstances. Today is the day where I educate myself and also you guys on this phenomenon and hope for new theories to arise. It all started in January 1959 when another expedition was planned for the experienced hikers, a group of 8 men and 2 women, who all but one studied at the Urals Polytechnic Institute. The group was led by Igor Dyatlov, and the goal was to reach the peak of Otorten, a mountain in the northern Urals of Soviet Russia. This was a category 3 hike, which means that it was the most difficult, so these hikers were preparing for months for this hike. Yuri Yudin had to leave the trip early because of his sciatica that he had to fight with, but this ultimately saved his life. The hike started on February 1st and was expected to end at February 12th, as Dyatlov promised to send a telegram to their sports club as soon as they returned. In the first day they traveled only 4 kilometers, which could have been because of the amount of gear that they were carrying after Yudin's departure and due to the weather, and the visibility was short. It was already getting dark, so they decided to store excess gear in a nearby camp base and set up a camp on the slope of Kholat Syakhi, also known as Dead Mountain. They had dinner around 6 or 7 PM and everyone seemed to be in a good mood. And then, that's it. Silence. Until February 12th came, the day the hikers were meant to return, but at first there was no reaction, because these types of hikes tend to sometimes be longer than expected. Then, only by February 20th, the first search and rescue team was sent to the location, and later the army and police forces got involved. This is the part where it gets mysterious. On February 26th, the rescuers found their tent badly damaged and covered with snow, with the group's belongings and shoes left in the camp. Investigators said that the tent was cut open from the inside and the skiers left it barefoot or with socks. Then footprints were spotted next to the tent that followed downhill about 500 meters to a nearby woods until the footprints stopped because the snow covered them. Then, under a large old cedar, the searchers found remains of a fire and the first 2 bodies. Yuri Krivoshenko and Yuri Doroshenko were found shoeless and half naked, with minor cuts and bruises. Their cause of death was determined to be hypothermia. Also, branches on the tree were broken up to 5 meters, indicating that one of them tried climbing the tree to look for something or seek shelter from someone. Then 300 meters up the slope from the cedar and on the way to the tent, searchers found the next body, Igor Dyatlov, with minor cuts, bruises, a missing tooth, and blood on his lips. Zenaida Kolmogorova was found 630 meters from the cedar tree with minor cuts and 1 larger bruise from an unknown origin. Rustem Slobodin was found later, on March 5th, but he was 480 meters from the cedar, also with similar minor wounds and a fractured skull, but it was not serious enough to be the cause of death. These 3 bodies did not have serious injuries that could cause death, so their cause of death was concluded to be hypothermia. The remaining 4 bodies were found only 2 months later, on May 5th, when the snow had started to thaw. In a 6-foot ravine, Nikolai Chibak's Brignoye had major skull damage. Alexander Kolevatov was found to have broken nose, was missing his eyes and soft tissue around them, and to top that, his clothes had traces of radiation on them. Also, Lyudmila Dubinina and Semyon Zolotaryov were found to have major chest fractures. According to Dr. Boris Vozrozhdeny, the force required to cause such damage is comparable to the force of a car crash. Also, Dubinina was found to have missing eyes, soft tissue and tongue, and her clothing also had radioactivity. This is the reason this incident is so popular and still unsolved, because so many aspects are at play and a simple theory can't cover all the details, but we will still go over some of the theories because it is fascinating. I am going to start with the most obvious theory, that avalanche or snow slab happened. A large amount of ice and snow fell down rapidly from the side of the mountain. The group woke up in panic because they saw or heard signs of avalanche happening, cut their way out of the tent and tried to seek for a safe place, although in panic they split up into 3 groups, but it was too cold for them to survive in those circumstances. Those who were found only 2 months later were caught in an actual avalanche, explaining their severe damage. Although this natural theory is widely accepted, there are a lot of factors that contradict that an avalanche was involved. There are actually no signs that an avalanche occurred, except for the snow on the tent, but the amount of snow was small, and also how were the footprints still there. This area is not avalanche prone due to the slope of the mountain they were on. Also, more expeditions happened there since the incident, and no conditions were reported that an avalanche might happen. The group were experienced. There is no way that they would build a tent in a way where avalanche might occur. Furthermore, they would not be able to outrun an avalanche, and footprints show that most of them left the tent at a normal pace. An analysis on the terrain were done, and it showed that if an avalanche did happen in that area, it would have not even went in the direction of the tent. Then there is the theory that Soviet military were involved. At the time, Soviet parachute mines were being tested, so hikers would have been awoken by loud explosions. They panicked and ran away to find safety, but froze to death, while the remaining members were injured by the following parachute mines. They detonate while still being in air, and can produce signature injuries similar to those experienced by some of the hikers. And there is evidence that supports this theory. There actually were reports of glowing orange orbs floating or falling in the sky that were confirmed by meteorologists. Also, some people claim that the tent was not erected correctly, which is something that experienced hikers don't have problem with, suggesting that the military did something to the tent and possibly cleared some evidence that could point to them. But the problem is that the military would know how to put up a tent correctly, so maybe they erected it incorrectly on purpose, thinking that the hikers were amateurs. Okay, but what about the discovery of radioactivity in some of the clothing? Well, it might have been a radiological weapon. Then again, it would have affected all the bodies and all of the clothing. Also, the skin of the bodies was an unnatural orange color, and some had even grey hair. But that can also be explained with the natural process of mummification. But then again, the case was closed really fast by Soviet authority and the files were suppressed, despite the strangeness of the unnatural injuries. Therefore, one could suspect that there is information and/or evidence they don't want you to know. However, you have to remember that it was the Soviet Union. A lot of information was suppressed, especially domestic incidents. It is interesting that with every detail this theory suggests, it can be contradicted. Moving on, whenever there is an unexplained mystery, comes the paranormal explanations. In this instance, there are 2 widely popular theories that involve the paranormal, and coincidentally both have photographic evidence. Well, evidence is a strong word in this instance, but it is something to keep in mind. One of the supernatural theories is that the group was attacked by a Yeti, which is a known legend among the local people there. The only proof being a photo which was taken from one of the cameras, and the immense force required to cause the types of injuries to 3 of the hikers. It just seems weird to me that this is actually a theory, because look at the facts. The 3 hikers that had severe injuries were crashing injuries and not slash marks or bite marks. No footprints of such creature were found, only the footprints of the hikers. What about the radiation? If they were stalked by such a creature, then why stop to build a fire? Talking about the picture, it doesn't look like a Yeti to me. Although the picture quality is not the greatest, also it is out of focus. But that's understandable, because it was 1959. The legend says that the creature is tall, but this just looks short, with rather thin arms, no offense, which reminds me of a person in a coat, and based from the previous pictures taken on the camera, it might be Nikolai Tibiux Brignol in this picture. Sorry for the pronunciation, by the way. Moving on, the second supernatural theory is that a UFO was involved, and the strange orange spheres in the sky that were spotted, and this photo right here, taken by one of the hikers, serves as evidence. Moreover, at the day of the tragedy, February 1st, 1959, Soviet armed forces launched several rockets that, according to them, landed in the North Ural Mountains. But as I mentioned previously, some geologists spotted glowing and pulsating orbits flying towards the Kholat Syakhi mountain where the Dyatlov group were. However, I do feel like this fact adds more proof towards the military involvement rather than there being a UFO. According to the theory, UFO is what scared the group away and apparently left some radiation on clothing. Lev Ivanov, who was the man in charge of the investigation, made some interesting claims in early 1990s, saying that forest treetops were burned and that some members of the Soviet Congress forced him to take out any reference drawn from the Mansi hunters and other testimonies that had given of flying spheres. But then it turns out that Ivanov was paid to do this interview where he gave this extraordinary information all of a sudden. But talking about the photo, it is actually mysterious because the quality is too bad to understand anything in the photo, so we can't draw a clear conclusion, and also the photo was made manually by people in the crime lab working with the film. Then there is the last theory that I will briefly touch on that actually makes some sense. There is a possibility that infrasound was present at the time and it created discomfort among the hikers. So they panicked, cut the tent, to quickly try to seek shelter from the discomfort. And when they did indeed do that, it was already too late because the next natural enemy, brutal cold, struck them. According to Donny Acher, who researched the incident for 5 years, says the infrasound was created by a wind phenomenon named Kármán vortex street, which can produce a terrifying, powerful sound which can't be picked up by human ears but can cause physical discomfort and mental distress. And due to the topography of the Kholat Syakhi, this natural phenomenon is possible. So this can explain why most of the bodies were found with no lethal injuries, except for the 3 victims that possibly stumbled over the ledge of a ravine in the darkness. Let me just quickly address the details that make this incident unique. Almost every theory loses credibility because it can't explain the radiation that was detected on the clothes. But let me enlighten you that these clothes belonged to Kolevatov, who studied nuclear physics and could have easily come into contact with radioactive materials, and Krivonychenko had worked at a plant for nuclear weapons. Yes, I mentioned previously that Dubinina was found with the radioactive clothes, but as it turns out, those clothes actually belonged to Krivonychenko, so that hopefully explains it. And the hikers who were found with the most extraordinary injuries were those who were found only 2 months after their death, and that is a long time in the wild. Dubinina's missing tongue tends to be overlooked because it could have been eaten by scavengers. Okay, so what do I think? I think it must have been either military being involved or the infrasound theory. But I will give no further explanations because I might mess up, because I have been only investigating this incident for a week. So I don't have enough experience, enough facts checked to give further thoughts. I really liked researching this incident because there are so many factors at play. There's the mysterious deaths, like half of the people died of hypothermia and then half of them like missing tongue, like missing eyes and stuff like that, and like crushing injuries to some of them. And also the weird photos. In this video I explained them, but they are still there, and it still doesn't explain the whole picture as a whole. The whole picture being the Dyatlov Pass incident. It doesn't explain that. It doesn't explain what happened to these hikers. And hopefully one day we will find out, although I don't believe that we truly will. But I will for sure return to this topic, because it was really interesting. Once you're in it, you just can't stop researching every detail. There's just so many things, because it's also half of it was documented by the hikers themselves, diaries, cameras, stuff like that. And still there's so much information, but because there is no explanation, I'm leading towards the military theory. Some details were actually suppressed for their own good, because they were involved. It was maybe their fault, although I'm not gonna go into those crazy details, because I need to fact check them, because I might waffle some wrong words at the wrong time. I might mess up. So yeah, I will keep it short. A lot of details are taken out of context as red herrings, and that is the problem, that people tend to overlook things and then they dismiss their theories. But no, I would suggest you, I would advise you to theorize, make your own theories, talk about it, and maybe we'll come up with a conclusion one day, and hopefully we will. Hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you later. Bye.